All right, let's take a trip back in time to 2010. Now, I know what you're thinking. That doesn't sound that long ago, right? But in tech years, it's practically another era. And 2010, well, that was a really pivotal year. A time when a few really bold experiments started to completely change what it meant to learn online.
So to really set the scene, think about what was going on. Apple just dropped the iPad, which totally changed how we interacted with screens. You had that huge volcano in Iceland, Eyjafjallajökull, yeah, I'm not going to try that again, that grounded flights all over Europe. It was a crazy reminder of how connected and fragile everything was. And oh yeah, Facebook, it just passed 500 million users. 1 billion. So that's the backdrop. New gadgets, global shakeups, and social networks just exploding. And right in the middle of all that chaos and excitement, you've got this one educator, Morten Flate Paulsen. He comes along and asks this simple, but honestly revolutionary question. He's thinking, what if a classroom isn't some closed-off box? What if it's an open stage? And what if the stuff students make isn't just for the teacher's eyes, but for, the entire world to see? Okay, so this leads us to our first big story. This really groundbreaking course over at Portugal's Open University. And this wasn't just another online class, let me tell you. It was a live experiment in what you might call radical openness. The whole thing was built on this philosophy he called cooperative freedom and transparency. Sounds a bit academic, right? But let's break it down. Cooperative freedom basically meant students could learn together in this network, but nobody was going to force them into those awkward group projects we all hate. They had freedom. But the second part, transparency, that was the real game changer. It meant their work was going to be public. And that created this powerful sense of accountability, You're going to try a little harder when you know anyone can see your work. So you're probably wondering, what did this actually look like week to week? Well, first off, forget your typical lectures and final exams. This was totally different. Every week was a cycle of creating stuff out in the open. Step 1, find. Students had to go out, find resources, and share them on their own blogs. Step 2, produce. They had to actually make something, a video, a presentation, whatever, and publish it. Then they had to review what their classmates made and jump into these structured discussions. The big takeaway here, learning wasn't just sitting back and absorbing information. No, it was an active public performance. And this is the part that I find so fascinating. Paulsen gave them a choice. He said, look, you can email me your work privately, you can post it in our closed little forum, or you can publish it for the whole world to see. And what happened? He was totally surprised. Almost everyone, as he says here, chose the most transparent option. They didn't run from the spotlight, they ran right into it. And here's what's so cool. The university's official learning system, that was just a home base. The students went way beyond it. They started building their own personal learning environments, that's what they called them, using all these tools that were just becoming popular. We're talking YouTube, SlideShare, Facebook, Twitter, WordPress, all of it. They were making video essays, sharing presentations, and they even started these Facebook groups that pulled in hundreds of people from outside the actual class. It was wild. So what was the result of all this openness? It was incredible, really, because all their work was public. It wasn't just their classmates giving them feedback. You had actual experts from around the world just stumbling upon their projects and jumping into the comments. There was this one interactive presentation on cooperative learning that got feedback from people who had zero connection to the university. The classroom walls had just completely disappeared. All right, so while all this crazy experimentation is going on in his classroom, Paulsen was facing a totally new challenge on a much, much bigger stage. The presidency of EDEN, the European Distance and E-Learning Network. But he was a little hesitant. He was basically asking himself this question, to E or not to E? Was he really the guy for this massive job? Could he really handle the politics, the stuffy formal dinners, having to give speeches off the cuff in English to a room full of international academics? He had some serious doubts. And you can see his whole internal debate laid out right here. For every doubt he had in his head, can I really handle the secretariat in Hungary? Am I good enough to chair these tough meetings? His colleagues had an answer. They were like, go for it. They saw it as a huge opportunity for him to bring all his innovative ideas to a much bigger stage and to promote more women in leadership. The community basically just pushed him to say yes, and thankfully, he did. And what's so important here is that he didn't invent a new playbook. He took the exact same principles from his little classroom experiment and applied them to this huge European organization. His entire vision was built on these 4 ideas: flexibility, cooperation, transparency, and celebration. He wanted to scale up the energy of that open classroom to an entire continent. And these weren't just nice words on a poster, they were his genuine roadmap.
But here's the twist in the story. While Paulsen's out there pushing the future of learning on an international stage, back home at his own institution in Norway, NKI, he was fighting a much more old-fashioned battle.
And honestly, nothing paints a clearer picture of the problem than this quote from his own daughter. Can you believe it? She signs up for one of her dad's institution's online courses, and the first thing she gets is a mountain of paper in the mail. She literally asks him, "Dad, what am I supposed to do with all this paper?" It's just this perfect, almost funny example of an organization with one foot in the future and the other stuck firmly in the past.
Yeah, Paulsen had a great name for it, the Nope Envelope. I mean, just look at this ridiculous process. For a course that's supposed to be online, the staff would literally print out all the materials, manually stuff them into these giant envelopes, spend a fortune on postage, and then mail them out. It wasn't just a waste of money and trees, it was totally confusing for the students who, signed up for a digital class.
And check out this number. In 2010, NKII was celebrating 12,500 online enrollments. That's a ton of students. But it just makes that Nope envelope even more frustrating, right? They had the audience, they had the demand, but their back-end processes were still stuck in the dark ages of mail-order courses. The missed opportunity here was just massive. Okay, so we've got these two parallel stories happening in 2010. On one hand, you have this incredibly futuristic open classroom. On the other, you have an institution that's still mailing paper. So what's the big idea that connects all of this? To get that, we need to zoom out a bit and look at a theory that was really starting to take hold right around then.
And that theory is called connectivism. It was pioneered by a guy named George Siemens, and it's basically a learning theory designed for the digital age. The core idea is simple but profound. Learning doesn't just happen inside your brain. It happens across networks of people and information. So in this way of thinking, the connections you have aren't just a bonus, they are the learning.
So, late in 2010, Paulsen actually meets up with Siemens in Oslo. And as they're talking, Paulsen has this huge aha moment. He realizes that his own theory, cooperative freedom, which he developed over years and years of teaching, was basically saying the same thing as Siemens's connectivism. Two different paths, but they both led to the exact same conclusion. The future of learning is all about the network. And this is where it all clicks into place. Just a couple of years before, back in 2008, Siemens and a colleague had run a course based on these exact ideas. It was totally free, open to anyone in the world, and it got something like 2,000 students to sign up. Today, that course is seen by pretty much everyone as the very first massive open online course, or as we call them, a MOOC. So Paulsen's classroom experiments in 2010 weren't happening in a vacuum. They were a real-world demonstration of the ideas that were about to explode and totally reshape higher education. So that's where we'll end it. Back in 2010, putting your learning out there for everyone to see felt pretty radical. It was an experiment. But now, I want you to think about your own life today. When you watch a tutorial on YouTube, or ask a question in a forum, or share a project you're working on online, how much of your own learning is now happening out in the open? What was once this really edgy idea has kind of become the new normal for a lot of us, hasn't it?